Somewhere around 270 BC, a man lay dying in agonizing pain, a blocked kidney stone, weeks of it, the kind of pain that makes people beg for it to end. And on what he knew was his final day alive, he sat down and wrote a letter. Not about his suffering, about making sure a friend's kids would be taken care of. His name was Epicurus, and the argument he spent his life building is the reason he could do that. Here's the core idea, and it's deceptively simple. Epicurus said, while you exist, death isn't here. Once death is here, you don't exist. You and death are never in a room at the same time. So what exactly are you afraid of? Not pain that ends before death arrives. Not the experience of being dead. There is no experience because there's no you left to have one. He wasn't being clever for cleverness' sake. He genuinely believed the universe was just atoms, tiny particles, endlessly rearranging. A person is a specific, temporary arrangement of them. Death isn't some cosmic punishment or void waiting to swallow you. It's just atoms going back to doing what atoms do. No different, physically, than a wave breaking or a fire going out. 200 years later, a Roman poet named Lucretius took this further, and this is the part almost nobody talks about. He asked, think about all the time before you were born, billions of years where you didn't exist. Does that terrify you? Of course not. You don't lose a second of sleep over the eons before your birth. So here's his move. The time after you die is the exact same kind of non-existence. Same nothing, just facing the other direction. If one doesn't scare you, logically, the other shouldn't either. It's called the symmetry argument, and it's one of the sharpest pieces of ancient reasoning most people never hear, because content usually stops at the original quote. Now, here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Because this isn't settled. In 1970, a philosopher named Thomas Nagel wrote a response that's still taught today. His argument, maybe death doesn't have to hurt to be bad. Maybe it's bad simply because it takes something from you. All the years, relationships, and experiences you would have had otherwise. You don't need to feel a loss for it to be a real loss. And decades before that, the poet Philip Larkin basically said Epicurus was dodging the actual fear. He called it specious stuff. Technically logical, but missing the point. What terrifies people isn't a sensation. It's the idea of total, permanent erasure, what he called the anesthetic from which none come round. Not pain, erasure. So even 2,300 years later, brilliant people still don't fully agree with him. That's worth sitting with. What makes this land differently is who was saying it. Epicurus wasn't a detached academic. He ran a community called the Garden, and it broke the rules of its time in a way that's rarely mentioned. It let in women and slaves as full members, when the era's biggest schools didn't. One of his own former slaves ended up living and studying there as a philosopher in his own right. He also lived nothing like the word that now carries his name. Epicurean, today, means indulgent, hedonistic. The real Epicurus ate barley bread, drank mostly water, and warned his followers that overindulgence just leads to more pain later. His followers even memorized a short 4-part formula. Nothing to fear from the gods, nothing to fear from death. Good things are easy to get, bad things are easy to endure. Repeated almost like a mental override switch. And when his own death finally came, after 2 weeks of real physical agony, he didn't perform peace for an audience. He asked for a warm bath, drank a cup of wine, and reminded the people around him to remember what he'd taught them. Then he died. So the real question this leaves you with isn't just should you fear death? It's this. If the actual founder of this idea could face weeks of physical agony and still write a letter more concerned with someone else's kids than his own pain, what exactly are we so afraid of in comparison on an average Tuesday? Epicurus never claimed death didn't matter. He claimed you'd never actually be there to experience it going wrong. Whether that comforts you, or whether you side with Nagel and Larkin that something is still being lost, that's the argument that's been running for over 2,000 years, and it's still not over.